Thanks. How you doing? Good. We missed the ice up here in Morgantown, generally, I think, so that's fantastic news. Has anybody done anything Christmassy yet? Anybody? Yeah? You put a tree up? Okay. Did you dig it out yourself? No. Oh, yeah, so we've had some Christmassy stuff this weekend. Cohen had a thing at school on Friday night, and we had all the kids there, and Santa came, and I was waiting in line with one of our littles, and we get up to see Santa, and she's very excited about it. We get up to see Santa, and I should also tell you that some of our kids are obsessed with riding in my car. They love Daddy's car. They always want to ride in Daddy's car. So we get up to Santa. She's on Santa's lap. He looks her in the face and says, "And what would you like for Christmas, little girl?" And she says, "I like Daddy's car." Like in your big moment, this is the ask. Whatever you want, a pony, an elephant, like ask for it. And she just wants more time in Daddy's car. So we saw some Christmas lights last night. Anybody done any Christmas light? Look, it's like the only time it's okay to drive really slow by somebody's house in a creepy sort of staring sort of way. It's cold and we're headed toward Christmas, and I don't know what could be better. So we're going to continue today the season of Advent in our series, Christmas Can Still Change the World. And we're going to look at what I've wanted to do in this series is there are all sorts of texts that the New Testament writers quote from the Hebrew Bible. And often we just assume that when they were written that somebody wrote them about what they thought would happen like 700 years in the future. And actually they wrote it about their own time and place. And what I find really interesting is to ask the question, okay, this is what the original context was. Why in the world would Christians reread that and then say, oh, we think Jesus fits this. We think this fits our experience of Jesus. So I want to do that a little bit again today. And we began, Jen read this text from Isaiah 9, and it begins with people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Most people know this text, even if they've never read the Bible, because Handel's Messiah made this text really, really famous. How many of you yeah. So, I mean, this is where, in some ways, the Christian linkage to this text was reinforced in a big way by Handel's Messiah. And so it's talking about light coming into darkness. It's talking about throwing off the oppressor's yoke and being liberated. It's talking about the end of war and all the weapons of war and all the sort of accoutrements of, I don't know if that's what you actually call them, but accoutrements of war, all that stuff being gotten rid of, burned in the fire. And then it says, a child is born to us. A son is given to us. And authority will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be vast authority and endless peace for David's throne and for his kingdom, establishing and sustaining it with justice and righteousness now and forever. A child has been born. We looked last week at Isaiah 7, where there's a guy named King Ahaz of Judah. How many remember, did you catch that from last week? And Ahaz was afraid of the Assyrian Empire, or was afraid of the Israelites and the Syrians, and he was going to appeal to the Assyrian Empire to come save them. And Isaiah says that's a terrible decision. They will take over. They will make you play by their rules. You just need to be faithful. You just need to stay still. Don't do anything. Just trust that God is going to. And here's the sign. A baby's going to be born. And we talked last week that baby was likely Ahaz's own child, Hezekiah, who would later take the throne and was. Ahaz is not his. The summary of his life is that he did evil. The summary of Hezekiah's life is that he did good. And what does it mean when a monarch has a baby? It means that the lineage continues. It means that the Davidic king Ahaz is going to have a Davidic successor, which means that God's promise is true. There will always be a descendant of David on the throne. Now, that eventually runs out because they're completely destroyed. We'll mention that here in a bit. So Ahaz, in some ways, is the embodiment of failed leadership, right? He's the embodiment of somebody who panics, who can't be calm, somebody who can't just stay the course. He just is erratic, and he makes some poor choices. And this Isaiah 9 is still a continuation of Isaiah 7, sort of this moment. And so we could look at Isaiah 9, a child is going to be born, a son is given. It could be read as a birth announcement, right? I mean, when somebody has a baby, what do they do a lot of times? They send something into the local paper, right, to say, we had a baby. And maybe there's a picture of the baby, and maybe there's a write-up about the baby or and the parents or whatever. It could be read as a birth announcement. So from now on, I want to invite you to do this. This is one way to read it. When you read Isaiah 9 or you hear it read, think of it in terms of this next video clip I'm going to show you, because I think it's very, very similar to what Isaiah had in mind. So let's just take a look at this. Think of Isaiah 9 as being that moment, right? When essentially the new baby has been born, the new king has been born, and they're like, like they're holding it up. You know what I mean? Like, and be honest, how many of you have ever held a newborn baby and your first impulse was, right? I mean, this is ingrained, and they're making like a new version of this. And so a whole new generation is going to have this desire to pick up small children and say, when you hold them up, right? So it could be a birth. It could be saying, a new king has been born. Or this text could also be related to Hezekiah is already around, and this is the celebration of the coronation of the new king. Right? That this would be a text that would have been written in honor of the king's. He's now on the throne. Everything that we've been worried about is past. We have the promise of a Davidic king, and the Davidic king is going to liberate us from our oppressors, and the Davidic king is going to bring peace and prosperity back to our kingdom, right? This is the two ways you can begin to see this text. And either way, it's celebrated. This new Davidic king is going to be celebrated with 4 titles. And the 4 titles are Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal or Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Now, it makes a little bit of sense why people would have read this and maybe applied some of these to Jesus. In its original context, and I know looking at some of these, you're like, there's no way they meant this about Hezekiah. Actually, in its original context, I want to walk through these in just a second. The original context, this is absolutely about the new king being born or taking the throne. This is a language that would have been very familiar to the Jewish people in this time to talk about their leaders. And so if you begin to think about it like this, what do these 4 titles mean? A wonderful counselor. It really means wise governance. Somebody who knows how to govern. Somebody who governs with wisdom. Somebody who knows how to conduct the affairs of the state, right? That's what it's talking about. A wise counselor. What about mighty God? Now, this is the one we're like, see, it can't be talking about Hezekiah. Here's what's interesting. In the ancient world, in lots of empires, in the Egyptian Empire, in the Assyrian Empire, even in the Roman Empire later, but even in the Jewish kingdom, it was common to see a divine link between the king and the deity you worshipped. In some ways, the king was viewed to be the embodiment of that God leading the people. So the king was supposed to be wise. The king was supposed to be faithful to the commands of God, because the king was the embodiment of God for the people. They couldn't see God, but they could see the king, and so the king would follow that role. The king was often called, wait for it, Son of God. Right? When Jesus comes along and this gets applied to him, this has been applied to kings throughout history. Notice a couple texts from the Psalms. These are coronation texts. I will announce the Lord's decision. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. There's actually, this is quoted in the New Testament about Jesus. Right? This is a psalm of coronation where in the context of the psalm they're in danger, but a new king is taking the throne. And here's, God said to me, you are my son. Today I've become your father. What is this text saying about the king? The king is Son of God, right? Notice this one. Psalm 89. He will cry out to me, you are my father, my God, the rock of my salvation. Yes, I'll make him the one born first. I'll make him the high king of all earth's kings. Right? And this language of being born first, right? That even if he wasn't born first, he is now. Right? That's sort of what it's saying, that God is taking this person, making this person his son, and giving them power and control. And then we come back to eternal father. Now, it was a patriarchal society, so father would have been a very common word. But what about the eternal or everlasting part? This is talking about stability, right? This king is going to lead us in ways that are stable and sustain our kingdom. We're going to have stability, and it's going to be okay. Right? How many of you ever had like an inner ear infection? You know how that makes you all wobbly? Or maybe, how many of you ever been on like a ferry when it first takes off, like a big ferry? Every time, I'll start to get a little like, whoa, what's happening to me here? And that sort of sense of disequilibrium can happen in entire countries. And in this case, they're saying that this king is going to bring back a stability that we have not known for a long, long time. And then Prince of Peace. I mean, this one's pretty obvious, right? What will this king do? This king will lead us in the path of peace. And peace in the Hebrew Bible, as they mentioned it in the candle lighting, it's the word shalom. It means peace, but it doesn't just mean peace. It doesn't just mean we stop hitting each other, or we stop bombing each other, or we stop gossiping about it. Like, it doesn't mean that we just have, like, okay, we're okay with each other. What it means is, it means wholeness. It means well-being. It means everything being in its appropriate place. It means no anxiety, no worry, no fear, no dread, right? It means everything is exactly how it should be. This king is going to lead us in ways that are peaceful. I mean, what is this text about? It's the text longing for a leader who would create a kingdom of peace and justice. And they believed that when Hezekiah was born, that this would be what he would do. And if you read the Hebrew Bible, I think it's 2 Kings 18, what it'll tell you is that Hezekiah walked in the ways of Yahweh, walked in the ways of God. He was faithful. But when you take sort of a step back and look at his leadership, here's what you also have to know. Hezekiah withstood the Assyrians, but he ended up caving to Babylon. And he actually brought in some Babylonian envoys, and he took them around and showed them all the wealth of the kingdom to sort of brag, like, hey, check this out. Look how much we've got. And the Babylon said, sweet, we're going to take it. Right? It's sort of like the movie Home Alone. When Joe Pesci comes in at the beginning of the movie, and he's talking to the parent, but he's really casing the joint, and he realizes there's a lot of good stuff. It's very similar to what's happening to Hezekiah. Notice what Walter Brueggemann, the scholar, says. In actual practice, the regime of Hezekiah at the end of the 8th century in Jerusalem did enact some remarkable policies, notably withstanding the assault of the Assyrian army. In the end, however, the rule of Hezekiah proved to be a disappointment. This glorious anticipation did not work out, for Hezekiah ultimately capitulated to the rising power of Babylon. How many of you have ever voted for a politician and then regretted it? Yep. Right? And this is essentially what happens with Hezekiah. Man, the campaign promises were great. Really felt the energy. Was really exciting. And his reign was, it was okay. He did some good things. He centralized worship. He did some good things. But he failed in similar ways as his father failed. And so they had to punt. Right? I mean, when you punt, what are you doing? Like, we can't move the ball down the field, so we're just going to kick it down, and maybe we'll get another shot at it. Right? So when Hezekiah failed, this thing sort of starts becoming hope deferred. Like, we thought it was going to happen, but now it's not. Right? We know about that, right? We thought we were going to get the job, and we didn't. We thought we were going to get to do the thing we always wanted to do, and we're not, right? This thing that you pin all your hopes on it, and then it just doesn't pan out. And so when the Jesus story enters history, they're still punting this hope that we're going to have a Jewish Davidic king who's going to come in and who's going to make everything okay. We're going to get our wonderful counselor, our mighty God, our everlasting Father, our Prince of Peace is going to arrive. Do you see why Christians would begin to look at this text based on their experience of Jesus and say, maybe the thing we've been hoping for all along, the peace and justice, the king and the kingdom we've longed for, maybe it's found in this Jesus. But what I've discovered is I think we have two different